Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are analyzing a series of deeply unsettling accounts drawn from extensive source materials where folklore, possession, and just devastating human cruelty all intertwine. We're going to navigate through some of the absolute darkest corners of recorded lore and documented cases to see exactly how they connect. It's a fascinating but honestly deeply unsettling journey, so let's just dive right in.
Which brings us to a huge, fundamental question that shadows literally all the accounts we're exploring today. What happens when the line between human evil and the paranormal is blurred? Because as we go through this material, you'll see that the sources force us to question what is truly more terrifying, the ghosts that supposedly haunt us, or the people living right next door.
Because, well, sometimes the monsters are very real. While we'll be exploring supernatural legends and intense accounts of possession today, you're definitely going to notice a running theme. Human darkness almost always plays a central, horrifying role in these events. Right, let's jump straight into our first account, the haunted Delhi mansion. A tragic new start for a grieving family that quickly spiraled into a total nightmare. So following the tragic death of their father in a car accident, this family moved from Punjab into a newly built, super luxurious 3-story mansion in Delhi. Now, for the first 2 years, everything was completely normal. But then, the manifestations reported in this home became intensely physical. It started with the children seeing a floating, disembodied face with bloody teeth, and it was always accompanied by this overwhelming, completely unexplained smell of burning flesh. But the brunt of this supernatural assault fell on the 21-year-old aunt. Her physical deterioration was just incredibly rapid and completely baffled the doctors. According to the accounts, she suffered severe weight loss, dropping 10 to 15 kilograms in just 3 days. To put that into perspective, that is an almost impossibly fast decline. She was vomiting blood and began acting completely out of character, eventually exhibiting the full signs of a supposed possession, with her body contorting and bones literally cracking. The family desperately brought in spiritual healers and doctors, but the entity seemingly took complete control. The possessed aunt looked right at her family and spoke these chilling words: "I will not let her go. I will take her with me." Defying all medical and spiritual interventions, the young aunt tragically passed away in that house, bleeding from her nose as the entity reportedly claimed her life. But here's where it gets really interesting, and it beautifully, or rather terrifyingly, illustrates a crucial point in paranormal lore. The land remembers. When spiritual readers finally deciphered what had happened, they uncovered the grim, blood-soaked history of the acquired land the mansion was built on. Years prior, a deeply controlling man lived there. He starved and abused his own children. When their Bengali maid tried to intervene and protect them, he murdered her. He then beat his children to death. When his wife returned from a trip shortly after, he murdered her too before finally taking his own life and cursing the land. The entities the family saw perfectly mirrored the victims and the perpetrator of this horrific human tragedy. It just goes to show how lore is so often a community's way of processing unexplainable human violence, staining the geography long after the perpetrator is gone. Okay, moving on to Chapter 2, Murder at the Ghost Well. We're pivoting from paranormal lore to a documented true crime case from 2023 in Gandhi, Mumbai, to show how the supernatural can actually be deliberately weaponized. So picture a well in Gandhi. It was notorious among the locals for being haunted. People flat out avoided it out of pure fear. But one day, local kids playing nearby saw something really disturbing floating in the murky water. They ran to their parents, completely convinced they had just seen a ghost or an entity swimming in the haunted well. But when the police showed up, they didn't find a ghost. They pulled out the decomposing body of a young man named Karan. Now, what's so terrifying about this contrast is how a myth was deliberately used to mask a grim reality. The police found a purse on the body with a phone number, which eventually cracked the whole case wide open. It turned out Karan had been murdered by his father-in-law in an honor killing, simply because his marriage to a woman named Gulnaz was intercaste. The killers intentionally chose the haunted well as a dumping ground. They knew for a fact that the urban legend would keep locals away, and it worked. They successfully hid their double murder of both Karan and Gulnaz for an entire month, literally using the town's fear of the paranormal as their shield. All right, on to our third accounts, and I gotta warn you, this is probably the heaviest part of this explainer. The 500-year-old jinn. It's the story of Sajid and how extreme emotional vulnerability allegedly invited a terrifying convergence of dark entities.
Sajid was just a regular young guy working at a pharmacy in Maharashtra when his behavior suddenly changed drastically. He quit his job, became super aggressive, and was even found sitting on top of a kitchen cylinder muttering that he was going to take someone's life. His family was desperate, so they brought in a mulvi, a spiritual healer, and the diagnosis was horrifying. The healer identified a 500-year-old jinn, a pregnant Diane or witch, and two ghostly children, all attached to Sajid. But why him? Well, the source material reveals that Sajid had a brief relationship with a woman who turned out to be a Diane. She tricked him by presenting a pregnancy test kit that she claimed proved he was the father. But here's the kicker. Sajid recognized the kit. He had physically marked it as the 13th kit he sold that very day to a completely different man at the pharmacy. Realizing he had been used and betrayed on such a massive level, he just broke down completely. And it was in this state of profound, suicidal despair that these dark entities allegedly stacked onto him, using his broken emotional state as an open door.
So what do you do when you're facing something like that? The family's desperation escalated through a series of failed interventions. First, they tried holy Zamzam water and prayers at home, but that only temporarily subdued him. Next, the Malvi organized a graveyard ritual to actually bury the entities in a clay pot. He gave them one strict rule: do not look back. But Sajid's cousin Samir, who was a hardened skeptic, went with them. When he heard a strange voice behind him, Samir panicked, looked back, and was terrified to see a massive 16-foot entity towering right alongside the witch. The ritual was broken. Finally, out of sheer desperation, they traveled all the way to Uttar Pradesh to see a powerful tantric, who performed a grueling overnight exorcism, seemingly curing Sajid by 3:30 in the morning. But here is the absolute tragedy of this account. It highlights how even the most powerful interventions can supposedly fail if the entities are deeply enough entrenched. After the tantric's ritual, Sajid and his family went to a hotel to rest. But while they slept, Sajid woke up. Allegedly driven by the 500-year-old jinn seeking to mock the spiritual healer's power, Sajid destroyed his protective yantras, defiled them, and was then forced to choke himself to death in the bathroom. The entity reportedly left a final message: "Now it is my turn. I will take him." It is just a devastating account of how psychological trauma and paranormal lore can fatally intertwine. Actually, scratch that, it's more like a tragic proof that sometimes the darkest places in our own minds are the most dangerous hauntings of all. Okay, let's move to our final account, the ghost who testified, and we'll see exactly how this builds on our theme of the dead speaking out for human tragedies. We're going way back for this one. Tracing the timeline of this historical 1897 case from Virginia reveals something genuinely fascinating. It's the famous Greenbrier ghost case involving Elva Zona Heister. In 1896, Elva marries a man named Erasmus. Just a year later, the pregnant Elva is found dead. Erasmus acts completely grief-stricken, so much so that he violently prevents the local doctor from performing a proper autopsy, and he buries her in a high-necked gown. But 1 month later, Elva's apparition supposedly visits her mother, Mary, for 4 consecutive nights, and the ghost explicitly tells her mother that she didn't die of natural causes. Erasmus murdered her by breaking her neck. Armed with this paranormal testimony, the mother actually goes to a lawyer, secures an exhumation, and the subsequent court-ordered autopsy proves exactly what the ghost said. Her neck was broken. But there's one specific detail that completely blew this case wide open: the number 3. You see, Elva was Erasmus's 3rd wife. During her spectral visits, Elva's ghost warned her mother that Erasmus had 2 previous wives who had mysteriously vanished or died under strange circumstances. This revelation, sparked entirely by a supposed paranormal visitation, exposed a serial abuser and murderer, and it led directly to his conviction. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with something to think about. We've looked at cursed mansions built on domestic slaughter, haunted wells deliberately hiding honor killings, vulnerabilities exploited by dark lore, and ghosts literally demanding exhumations. It begs the question: are urban legends and ghost stories merely folklore meant to scare us in the dark? Or are they, in fact, the desperate echoes of human tragedies demanding justice from beyond the grave? Thank you so much for joining me in this structured analysis of the supernatural and the very real human darkness behind it. Keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.